speaker. Very, very excited about this. This is like our afternoon coffee that we are going to be having with Divya Mohan, who is a CNCF ambassador, a wonderful human being, team lead at HSBC, involved in many different things in many different places with many different people, is the proud mother of 3 cats, I believe. That's correct?
Yes, totally correct about that one. Just rescued one last week. So, yeah.
Anyway, so the family keeps growing. That's very good. Divya, it is wonderful to have you here. But today we are not here to talk about cats. We can talk about, we're here to talk about chaos engineering. We can probably find a way to connect cats in there. But so you've been working on Litmus Chaos. You've been working in the CNCF space, in the ecosystem. Can you just tell us really quickly, how did you get attracted to chaos engineering in the first place?
Actually, that's, one of the first things that everybody asks me. And it was by chance. And I really did not plan on getting involved in the cloud native space or in the chaos engineering space early 2020. But as fate would have it, I was part of organizing this local community day for AWS back in Pune, wherein I heard Adrian Hornsby from AWS speak about chaos engineering and how he has been developing these experiments to sort of play around with the infrastructure, if I may say so, really lightly, and inject failures and see what happens. So I was like, this sounds really interesting because coming from a production support background, this is sort of my jam, and I really like understanding why a system fails when it fails. So I dug deep, and I happened to stumble upon Uma and Karthik from one of the GitLab comments. I mean, I went down a really deep Google rabbit hole, and I ended up finding Uma and Karthik from there, and then we connected over Slack, and as this is rest is history. So yeah.
Okay, good. And as someone with an infrastructure background, what were some of the obstacles or roadblocks that you felt on a technical level to get into the space?
Oh, I mean, there were several because whenever you get in from an infrastructure background, specifically, me coming from an infrastructure background that dealt with on-premise infrastructure, it was more difficult to get accustomed to the cloud native space because in my day job, we really do not work. I mean, we really did not work, may I say. We really do not work with cloud native technologies. It's just recently that we've begun to sort of extend support to Kubernetes and work with Kubernetes as administrators. So that was last year. And when I started off, I had really no knowledge about Kubernetes or Prometheus, Grafana, all the observability tools. So all these things coming at me from different directions. And I was like, I think I need to take a step back and analyze what I don't know rather than jumping into what I know. So it turns out there were a lot of things that I didn't know at that point because there were a lot of reporting tools out there in the market. There were a lot of deployment tools. There were a lot of orchestration tools, containers, etc. And chaos engineering basically isn't sort of limited to one particular arena, but the whole point of it was that I did not have understanding of the cloud native ecosystem in the very first place when I started off. So it was really difficult for me, with all the tools. Then obviously the part wherein you need to know a little bit of YAML and you need to know a little bit of coding, because that figures in somewhere, and you really cannot move ahead without understanding at least the basics. So I had to go back, start from scratch again, and sort of revisit all the basics that I had learned during my graduation 8 years ago. So that sort of slowed down my progress a lot during the initial days. But then eventually, because of my involvement with the project, I started understanding stuff in the space a little more. And of course, being on the Kubernetes project has helped me a lot in understanding Kubernetes as an orchestration tool. So all of that put together was what helped me progress further. But the initial couple of days were not really as rosy as they seem right now. So yeah.
But to be fair, it is called chaos engineering, so there's got to be a little bit of unexpected elements. But okay, so you mentioned a lot of things about cloud native technologies. But just to clarify, for me, is chaos engineering only a cloud native technology?
No. So to be honest, the reason why I started getting more and more acquainted with cloud native technologies was basically because Litmus Chaos is a cloud native tool, but chaos engineering as a discipline or as a technology is not really cloud native. Fun fact: when Netflix started off, its migration to AWS and all of that happened. The actual reason behind it migrating to AWS was because of a data center failure, and that was an on-premise thing. So, that being said, there are tools, there are both open source and proprietary tools that are available that cater to whatever requirement that is at your end. Like if you're primarily an on-premise if you have a primarily on-premise environment and you have a lot of legacy servers on there, you have tools for that as well. And if you are, up and coming in the no startup with, I mean, not startup, I wouldn't say startup, up and coming in the no, company with a lot of presence in the cloud native space, you have tools for that as well. But the reason why I got into cloud native technology, I mean, in the cloud native space was because Litmus Chaos was a cloud native tool, and I needed to understand more about that before getting involved. So, yeah.
Okay, very good. And so you mentioned tooling a few different times. Just a quick summary. What are the options regarding tooling that are available in the market?
Oh, I mean, there's an exhaustive list that would probably cover 3 to 4 slides on a PPT, which is why I did not really go ahead with one. So I'm very sure that all the folks who are attending, KubeCon and Data on Kubernetes community, they are very well aware that Amazon just sort of announced its chaos engineering or chaos injecting tool. I think that was a few months ago. But it's hard to keep time because we're in the middle of pandemic, and I really don't. Ever since last March, it's been a blur. So forgive me if it's been more than a few months. So AWS has its own product. Then there's Gremlin, which is a leader in the space, and you have Litmus Chaos, which is the open source project that I work with. You have Chaos. You have Chaos Mesh, which is another tool in the open source space under CNCF. You have Chaos Toolkit, which is another open source project, that I wanted to get affiliated with, but never really got the time. Then obviously, the tools that were developed by Netflix are again open source and have now been developed into a platform of sorts for injecting chaos. So those are there as well. So, I mean, this is obviously, these are from the top of my head, and you definitely can Google and figure yourself out for whatever requirements you require. So the list is endless.
What would you say for folks that are in our community, they're working with data on Kubernetes? What kind of tools do you think they should be aware of?
So, I mean, it depends. Again, like I said, the tooling is very specific to your requirement, and based on whether you're on premise or whether you're on, on the cloud native, more towards the cloud native space. So, you really don't need to start off with the tool. I mean, if you're not comfortable with actually orchestrating chaos with a tool, because not everybody gets a buy-in at the organizational level for orchestrating chaos. So very obviously, when you say that, when you go ahead and speak to your organization, let's go and say that, hey, you know what, I plan to implement chaos engineering on my infrastructure. I want to start breaking things in production. I don't think that's the first thing that the first thing that the organization says will be, hey, okay, let's go ahead and break stuff. I mean, that's not the first thing. You obviously have to source the buy-in and figure out how to project it to them. So you can start off with very basic stuff. You don't even need a tool. So when I started off, and actually not when I started off, when I was reaching out to Adrian for advice and all the other engineers, the community for advice, what I was told is start off by writing small scripts and start off by understanding how you can inject chaos specific to your infrastructure and specific to your application. It can be as simple as a script that hogs your CPU. It can be as simple as a script that involves introducing network glitches. So, I mean, I'm not going to, be this marketing person and come out and say that, you use A and you'll get B. I mean, that's not who I am. Yeah. So you can start off small and then figure it out.
But I think that's the point is, like you said, in an organizational capacity, it's kind of what we were talking about earlier today with Mario, is that you've really got to use a lot of empathy. You've got to use a lot of patience, listening, really looking, does this fit the situation that we're in right now? But in that sort of sense as well, because some companies might just think about, they hear a horror story of where, problems may have happened. Could you give us an example of ways that organizations might make mistakes, where they might falter, things that they should keep in mind if they're going to start approaching this?
Oh, absolutely. Like, I've heard horror stories. I mean, I think a couple of horror stories were narrated in the past KubeCon. So, I mean, if you actually tuned into KubeCon, you'd probably be aware of some of them. But some of the things that could possibly, go wrong when you're trying to conduct a chaos experiment are not of the experiment are supposed to affect or target a particular particular infrastructure piece or a particular piece of code base. I mean, I'm just trying to generalize it here, but it's supposed to direct it at one particular piece, and from there you go on to sort of understand what the Achilles heel in that particular area is. So if you do not understand the scope, and if you're not defining it clearly, it's a sure shot step to failure, because you're just randomly doing it at any point in time, and you've just woken up one day and decided, hey, I want to break stuff on the go. So neither your customer is going to be happy, the end users, and your organization, take it from me, is never going to be happy, but stuff breaking in production. So that the scope needs to be clearly defined. Second thing is the chaos engineering in general needs to be a collaborative effort, and a lot of like, I understand that when you are talking about chaos engineering, I mentioned before that you have to target a particular a particular piece and then go on from there. But even with that, you have various stakeholders involved. You have various teams involved in supporting the application and supporting that piece of infrastructure. So you need to have all the relevant stakeholders involved. Not having that collaboration is another big mistake. The third thing is, obviously, if your application is already sort of glitchy, like even without injecting chaos, it's constantly causing customer problems. It's causing these errors for the customer, wherein it's running out of memory, it's consuming excessive CPU, and you perform a chaos experiment on it. You're not really going to learn anything, except for the fact that you just run out of memory, or you're just hogging all the CPU. So you need to ensure that your application is relatively stable and is in a and define a clear steady state for that stability, because you can only break things that are unbroken. You cannot sort of break things that are already broken in the first place. So you need to have a relatively stable state. So, I mean, these are a few things that could go wrong from an individual and a team perspective. So, yeah.
Okay, good. And very, very last question, because we got to move on to our next speaker. If I want to get involved in Litmus or chaos engineering in general, what would you recommend as first steps to get involved?
Okay, so based on your knowledge, based on the kind of things that it depends really. So I was primarily not aware of anything in the cloud native space, and to recount my mistake, I jumped in directly at the deep end and said, hey, I will do this. I will write a probe for Litmus Chaos that sort of puts the dashboard with all, it sort of displays all the results in the dashboard. And that was really not the right approach, because I barely knew anything about Kubernetes or Prometheus or Grafana or any of the other reporting tools in the first place. So if you do not know anything, don't jump in at the deep end, is my advice. But if you do have a fair knowledge of how things work, and you have a fair knowledge of the observability tools, go ahead, take a look at one of the open source tools or even the proprietary tools in the space, and go ahead, speak to the maintainers of that particular project, see where you can get involved. If like me, you were not aware, you obviously have other avenues like documentation, community, and other stuff, wherein you can take first baby steps and then go ahead and branch out into other stuff like I'm trying to do right now. So yeah, that's my advice, I guess.
Brilliant, Divya. That was fantastic. There were not a lot of time, so once again, a perfect excuse to have you back on a meetup in the future. If you don't know Divya, put a Divya in your life. It will improve your quality of life, your mental health, everything. I can't recommend it enough. Every conversation that I have with Divya, whether it's on Twitter, whether it's on Slack, whether it's anywhere else, it always makes my day better. So like I said, a wonderful human being, a great ambassador for the CNCF. Thank you very much, Divya.
Thank you so much for having me on.
My pleasure. Take care. Good.
Bye-bye.
Now, bye-bye, 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 bye-bye.